And we welcome you to In the Circle Live here as we cover the Summer Olympics, the Tokyo Games. This is the post-game, our first post-game, I would say, in Olympic softball internet history, right?
Yes.
I think we just made history here.
That is factually correct. Yes, sir.
You can't deny it. And what a way to do a post-game. USA, Canada, a classic game, old school pitchers duel, old Monica Abbott, the GOAT, against Canada's great pitching staff, and I mean staff, because that's the approach they went. And it goes the USA route, 1-0 the final. Lots to talk about this game, though. We'll be joined by Jenna Becerra shortly to talk about it. But, Vic, what a classic game. This tournament has been dominated by pitching. And with USA, that's their strength. When you got Monica Abbott and Kat Osterman as a 1-2 punch, and boy, they have lived up to that so far through 2 games, and they've needed every single out from their pitchers and just enough offense. Well, I know there's a lot of people upset about the offense. We'll get into that. But that was a heck of a game. The intensity, even though there's nobody in the crowd, you could just sense it. These two teams are high level. That was a high level softball game.
That was the type of game that makes you fall in love with the sport. That's the type of game that when you're a young fan, that lights that fire. Kayla Lombardo from Softball America put out a tweet about it this afternoon about watching the Olympics kind of lights that fire, similar to what happened in 2008 when the Summer Olympics were taking place for softball. That kind of lit a fire for a lot of young players. Watching Canada hang with USA, and if you're a fan of Team USA, yes, you got the win, but there are a lot of concerns right now with that USA offense.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. But what's not a concern was their defense. Their defense was spectacular. They made a big play in the 6th inning. That's the inning everybody will be talking about and thinking about. And, before we get into the breakdown of the game and our guest joins us, Vic, tell the audience where they can interact with us, not only on Twitter, on In the Circle SB on Twitter, but as well as comments here on our YouTube where you should be subscribed. Make sure you subscribe. If you haven't, do it. Make sure you give us a like as well. We appreciate that very much. Like us on Facebook. And we will still have our podcast tomorrow with our special guest, Chrissy Shoemaker, the new head coach at GW. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to for that. All right?
Yep.
Speaking of podcast shows, another good one is our host. She's back. She joined us in our pregame show, Jenna Becerra. First of all, how are you feeling after that nail biter between USA and Canada?
Well, I have to say, Eric, I feel like in the pregame show, we did actually sort of call this in the sense that it was like, yes, we think USA is going to come out on top, but it's not going to be easy. And that's exactly how it played out. I mean, Monica Abbott's curveball is just devastating. And I think that's ultimately what won the ball game for the U.S.
Yeah, I agree. Let's touch on that because you and I talked at length about the pregame. We weren't surprised about Monica Abbott. We were trying to figure out what Canada was going to do. You thought Lori would start. I felt that everybody was going to pitch, and boy, I got that one right. They went by committee. Sarah Gronwell gets the start. They bring in Kyra. They bring in Jason Bay's sister, which I forgot she was on the team. The great Lauren Bay, who's now Roland Regula, and then Danielle Laurie, and they held U.S. in check, although U.S. has some chances. But it was kind of fascinating. You've got this kind of new approach in softball that slowly has come into the sport, going by committee, a staff, versus maybe the old school, the GOAT, Monica Abbott. It's her ball. She's taking it the whole way. I was fascinated by it. What did you think about both teams' decisions, especially Canada going by staff?
I think it was a no-brainer in terms of Monica Abbott. She kind of got the jitters out, and it really is her second home in Japan too, just considering she's played professionally there for over a decade. It's just like, yes, give her this opportunity. Kat set the tone really nicely yesterday in day one, so give it to Monica. Like, they are such a great complementary duo in the circle. I think it was fantastic. In terms of Canada, I was surprised. I really thought, and we talked about this, Eric, I really thought that Danielle Laurie was going to get the ball. And I know she wanted the ball. Just knowing her, we've had her on the show for Believe in Softball. I know you've had her on In the Circle too. Like, that is her personality. And I don't know if I was reading things a little bit too much, but I was almost looking at her thinking, like, I think she's kind of fired up right now that she didn't get into the game until later. So I was surprised. Not surprised that they went by committee overall, that concept, just surprised that Danielle Laurie didn't get the start.
Well, Victor, I want to bring you in because you've recently seen Canada. You've called their games recently when they played USSSA and Vieira and other places. Not, I kind of hear what Jenna was saying. I was kind of surprised, although now in retrospect, because I was stunned that they pulled Sarah last night against Mexico when she had 4 no-hit innings. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, she's dominating them. But now it makes sense in retrospect. Clearly, Mark Smith, the head coach, and Lonnie Alameda, let's not forget, Lonnie Alameda, the pitching, helping with the pitching, okay? So clearly they had this in mind that they were to go by committee against Team USA, and I was reminded they did this exact same thing back in the 2019 Pan American Games against Team USA and nearly won the gold. They beat USA in there. USA had to double them up. That was the day where Monica Abbott pitched both games and shut them out and knocked them out. But, Victor, you saw them up close, and I know when you were talking to your people there in broadcasting the game, they like using Lori in this closer role as part of this. Mm-hmm. This is something they've embraced, Team Canada, as far as going by a committee, isn't it?
I think when you think about Team Canada, they have different pitchers that do different things very well. And then you could bring in Lori on the back end to either keep the game within a run like she did tonight, or if you have the lead, shut the door and give yourself the victory. And what makes Canada so fascinating is that they've gone with the same lineup in terms of pitchers. Groundwagon starts, then you see Kyra, and then you see Regula, and then you see Danielle Lori come out to close. It's worked for Canada so far, even though they split their first 2 games. But that's what Mark Smith and Canada is going to do. They're going to go by committee. They have a plan in place, and the plan has worked so far for Canada. They're still in the mix to play the gold medal game. Obviously, they still have games with Japan coming up. But I'm concerned about the USA offense. You have the bases loaded and in the first inning, a chance to put a crooked number and get Monica Abbott some breathing room, and you don't score. You have runners in scoring position in multiple innings. You only scored a 1 run. I'm worried that one of these games, USA is going to leave too many runners on base, and it's going to be that one critical hit that the opponent gets that can cost them the game and put them possibly out of gold medal contention.
Jenna, how do you respond to that? Because I know you were optimistic more than, hey, look, this has been an unusual path in training to get to the Olympics, which is all valid. It was just 1 game against Italy. How do you feel now? Do you? Victor's not the only one that's bringing this up. Some of our questions has been, of course, offensive dominated. You would think that we lost this game based on some of the comments I'm reading. I'm saying this offense is atrocious. That was one of our posters. So we did win, right?
We did.
Yes,
we
they
did.
won.
Team USA did win. I think there's a couple factors. It's like the preparation, obviously leading up to the Olympics, has been completely unprecedented, and different challenges than any other Olympic athletes have faced over the time that the Olympics have existed for softball. But I also think that, yes, it's time to make adjustments. That first day, you can kind of understand you're getting used to the facility, that sort of thing, the weather, all of these other outside factors. But really the most elite athletes, they make those adjustments. And I think I will say the offense that the U.S. has been timely enough. Like with Michelle Moultrie getting the job done yesterday, and now Amanda Chittister getting the job done today. They've gotten enough. And that's where it starts. It's like you have to have good pitching, you have to have solid defense, and you have to have timely hitting. So they've had good pitching, solid defense, and they've had timely hitting, but they are kind of skating on thin ice, to your point, Vic, where it's like, okay, but we can't allow for any hope, I guess. It's like you want to shut the door in these situations as much as possible, especially when you have Kat and Monica on the mound. It's like, you can do that. You have the opportunity to do that. Like, let's not put it all on their shoulders. Let's step up here offensively. So I agree. I think there are adjustments that need to be made. Absolutely. I think they're very capable of making them as well.
Let me kind of defend them on this a little bit. This is the best teams in the world. Canada has great arms. Groundwagon has been a stud in the Big Ten, was a player of the year, Big Ten pitcher of the year in Minnesota. She's their, to me, says Danielle Lori is one of the top 10 players of all time, in my opinion. And she looks fantastic in these 2 appearances so far. She looks phenomenal. Victor, I know you saw her up close. She looks incredible. pay credit to her in the payoff work. The Shakira has pitched at high levels. Her Japan, Yukiko Bueno is one of the is a gold medalist. She's a champion. She's a winner. Mexico has deep pitching. Are we just expecting, are we just trying to live in the past and these big cricket numbers where I've and I know Michelle Smith, they expected more offense in this tournament, and maybe we will as we get further in this, but I kind of always felt going in, this might be a pitchers type tournament because there's so much talented arms now that it might be difficult for an offense to get stuff going.
It is a possibility, Eric, and I feel with everybody having an opinion or a Twitter account or Facebook account, they think that if you win 1-0, that, oh my goodness, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and we can't hit the backside of the barn. But the important thing is, as Jenna alluded to, they got the timely hits when they needed to. But you want to have a game that you can get 2 or 3 runs early, give some comfort to Kat and to Monica, and that way you don't have to play that high-risk game where you have to cling to a 1-0, 2-0 lead and hope that Monica and Kat can continue to do what they do instead of making one mistake and you're finding yourself in a tie game or even worse. But the one thing I can take away from this for Team USA, Kat and Monica, as they go, they're going to dictate if USA wins the gold medal or not.
Yeah.
It's going to be on their arms to send USA to the gold medal game and get them the gold around their necks.
Yeah, when you don't give up runs, it's tough to lose. In fact, I think it's impossible to lose. Jenna, you mentioned adjustments. It's time to make adjustment. From what you could tell, what adjustments do they have to make? Is there something glaring that you saw that they need to do as an approach, or is this more like a lineup adjustment you're talking? What kind of adjustments do you want to you think you want to see there?
It's what I'm referring to is more so their approach in the box. Okay. And I think it's one of those situations too where it's simplifying really at the end of the day. Like there may be a lot of things going on in their heads. We talked about this earlier, Eric, where it's like they've all played each other so many times. They've seen Danielle Laurie a ton. Especially all the players that play in the Japanese Pro League, like they've seen a lot of those players a ton. Like they've played each other so many times. There's a lot of narratives that you can create in your head. Let's block all that out and just think about being on time and seeing the ball as well as possible and throwing your hands to where it's pitched, right? It's like just simplifying and breaking it down. I think that's really what needs to be done at the end of the day. And listen, we're coming off of arguably the best women's college World Series ever, if not definitely one of the best women's college World Series ever, where the amount of home runs and long balls was astronomical, especially when you have like a generational offense like Oklahoma that we witnessed. So coming from that to then a month later, here we are in Tokyo, and yeah, these are some of the best pitchers in the world. And all the veterans, by the way, a lot of the veterans, Kat, Monica, Ueno, Danielle Laurie, they're also in the circle. So yes, some of the best, we talk about this as the best in the world, but some of the best are especially in the circle. So it's not easy, and it's not going to be the same. It's not quite the same game. It's the same fundamentals, and we're all fans of the same sport, but it is a little bit different. International softball is slightly different than college. So I think there's also an adjustment that we can make as fans in terms of expectations and like what this softball is on this international stage.
Let's talk about the big inning that everybody will be talking about, the 6th inning. Monica Abbott has a no-hitter at this point, Jenna, going into it. She walks the leadoff hitter. Mark Smith obviously pinch runs for Joy Lai, who's probably their fastest runner on the roster. Joy Lai, former head coach at Bucknell, great we've had on the show. So she's at first. They get an out, and then Sarah Gronewagen, they decide to have her hit. And I know that, and by the way, we've learned this. Beth Mount, Michelle Smith, obviously doing this game remotely in a studio. We're seeing why the challenges of this. Because if you're in the stadium, you could probably have an idea what's going on. Why is Mark Smith talking? Why are the umpires talking? They're clearly trying to figure out if that was legal, that Gronewagen can re-enter the game. But obviously, when you're not in the stadium, you're just kind of guessing. So that was an interesting period. So hopefully, the point is, hopefully down the road, hint, hint, Los Angeles 28, there's no excuse for this. The softball broadcast needs to be in the stadium. Because I don't believe it or not, it's never happened before, I don't believe. In 2008, they did it in the studio as well. But that's a whole other rant for another time. So Gronewagen gets the first hit of the game for Canada against Monica Abbott, a double to right center. But USA with the relay comes home. They make the tag on Joy Lai out. They throw to third. not handle that allowed Groenewegen to go to third, but then Abbott gets the fly out to shallow left, runner holds, and then she gets the strikeout because she's Monica Abbott. But what did you think about that sequence? And one of the things I will say, because we've talked to Ken Erickson about this, and we talk about the offense, but one of the things when they built this USA team, they know pitching's their strength. When you have Monica Abbott and Kat Osterman, it is pivotal that you play good defense behind you, especially in this stadium where they have the turf. And they believe that they have the best defense. And if they play the best defense, they will win with pitching and defense and timely hitting. That's their philosophy. And it paid off in that sixth inning with that relay, Jenna.
Absolutely. And that is what should be executed in those situations. Like, that was a textbook execution. And it's not a surprise. I mean, Haley McClenny is one of the best outfielders in the world. And I hadn't seen her play recently since her Alabama days as much until Athletes Unlimited this past fall. And I was incredibly impressed with her. And she did get the Defensive Player of the Year at that experience. And by the way, I do think there's a lot of Olympians that played in Athletes Unlimited on that all-turf field. So
Great point.
A little bit of an advantage there in terms of like, okay, we've done this before. We kind of know how this handles, and we can make those adjustments. So I think she did a great job playing that off the wall. That's what you should do as an outfielder, as a center fielder. And then, of course, an excellent relay throw and a cut and all of that by Ali Aguilar. Like, that's what you should expect from someone like her out of UW. And a great tag by Aubrey Monroe. I mean, that is exactly how it should be executed. We don't always see that happening in college softball, though. We'll see errant throws. We'll see, like, hey, maybe you kind of missed the cutoff, et cetera. And, like, I think that is one of the biggest differences from that level to this level is just the airtight defense that we're seeing. And it was huge. I mean, there's a reason why that dad quote is, defense wins championships. It's like the ultimate sports dad quote or thing to say, but it's true.
I agree. And I think it was a great point about Athletes Unlimited because this Team USA team didn't get their, quote, big tour where they played every college team, played 40, 50 games like a normal. They kind of – and Athletes Unlimited, that was at a time where there was nothing else going on, and a good, decent amount of the players in the Olympic team participated in that. And you mentioned they played at where the Chicago Bandit Stadium is, where they have turf. Who knows? That could have helped them in a situation like this. They've all played – and the thing is, most of them, have, if not all of them, have already played in a baseball stadium setting to begin with, from pro ball and et cetera. And they've played on turf, to your point. And again, Victor, defense. You and I have covered Ken Erickson for a long time. I mean, you've covered him longer than anybody. You're talking, how many years you've covered Ken? 18, 20 going?
Yeah, long time.
Yeah. And
long time. I'll leave it at that.
And he's big on versatility, especially in an Olympic roster, which only has 15, yes, which I think is an outdated thing. I think it needs to expand for the next Olympics. But nonetheless, you have a limited roster number, flexibility, and then defense. And I think people I've talked to on Team USA would point to that gold medal game in 2008. They felt what got them beat was they had a couple chances with bases loaded against Yukiko Bueno in that game. They didn't deliver. And they made a couple of uncharacteristic errors that opened up a couple of runs for Japan. And I think their philosophy is in an event like this, the offenses are going to be shut down because there's too much pitching. We got to be solid defensively. And McClenny's arguably the best center fielder in the world. Aguilar, I think the reason she's starting is they believe she's the best second baseman in the world defensively. And Aubrey Monroe is in there because they believe she's the best defensive catcher in the world. And it paid off on that play. So now you mentioned the U.S. offense. Chittister gets the RBI hit. They get the run in. They scratched it out. They're 2-0. If you're Team USA, you have to feel good about that, right? I know, and again, I'm not going to read off all the tweets here because it's not positive. But you still got to feel good if you team. This was a great game. Canada's legit. I'm not opposed to seeing these two teams playing in a gold medal game, which could still happen, correct? And I think this was high-level softball.
Yeah, Eric, and you got to think about how close this game was on both sides. USA had their chances with the bases loaded and multiple runners on base. Canada had that threat in the sixth inning, even though they were no hit by Monica Abbott leading up to that. So it's going to be about what team executes in those clutch situations and who gets the timely hitting. That's what it's always been about that in postseason play and tournament play. Who can execute when the moments are the biggest? And USA did it, and Canada could not, and that's the reason USA is now 2-0.
Jenna, if I'm Canada, I would not put my head down. I thought you're probably frustrated because you had a chance there in that 6th inning. By the way, I thought everything was clean there. I know some people are trying to say, well, there was no obstruction there. I don't think they were trying to say, well, maybe Joy Lai should have slid a different way. I just give credit to the defense there. I don't think – was there anything you saw there that could have made a difference if you're Canada?
I mean, I guess my tendency as a player used to be to go straight in those situations. I probably did that a little bit too much with catchers, actually. But with the obstruction rule that does exist, it's like maybe, right? But that's sort of like a hindsight's always 20/20. You're making a fraction of a second decision in that situation. And oftentimes, if that throw is high, which the throw wasn't super high, but it wasn't like perfectly, at the knees necessarily for Aubrey Monroe. So she actually made an excellent tag, right? If that tag's not as good, she probably could have snuck in there by going around Aubrey Monroe. But it's just, that was an excellent tag. And that's why I think tags are also often not appreciated enough. It is so important. The throw can be fantastic, but that tag has to be spot on. And again, it was just every single part of that play was executed perfectly. But I don't blame Canada for sending her either. Put the pressure on him. I mean, it's a 1-run game. Like you got to do it, right? And they still had that runner at third base after that anyway, with less than 2 outs. So it's not a bad idea. I think it was just softball, right? Like it's just how it chalked up.
Well, and you're facing Monica Abbott. The chances you're getting are very few in between, right? So you got to take that chance. You can't assume you're just going to get multiple hits off maybe arguably the best pitcher in the world, if not all time, who was on top of her game.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest hit balls outside of Japan's home runs, let's say, that we've seen at the Olympics, too.
I agree.
Was that wagon hit, right? Which, by the way, pitchers who hit, my favorite thing. And you mentioned versatility and how Coach Erickson loves it. Like, I love it. I love the fact that she does that. I love the fact that Rachel Garcia does that, Ali Carda. Like, I think those things are so valuable. And we saw an example of that, at least giving them an opportunity they kept keeping them in the game, but giving them an opportunity to even win that game.
Well, I would argue that's why Ali Carter's on this team, because of her versatility. Could play first. She's even been able to play some outfield, I've been told, and could pitch, obviously. And if I'm Canada, shoot, find some at-bats for Sarah there, man. She crushed that ball. Like, and she had power. She had power back in her days when she hit consistently. Why not put her in the lineup there if you're Canada? Maybe we'll see her getting more at-bats down the road here. I know there's some part of that is that they want to use her as a pitcher, things like that. But, man, she hit Monica there pretty good, and I wonder if part of the reason they used her in that spot is because maybe Monica wasn't as familiar with her as, say, some of the other hitters that she's seen over and over.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of that from all of the teams, actually, in terms of pinch hitting. Of course, pinch running as well, like when it makes sense in terms of having speed on the base pass. But I think we're going to see that. I mean, again, like outside of just the starting 9 or 10 that are on the field, like these are the best players in the world. That is an all-world bench that each of these teams have. So we're going to see they need to utilize what they have. So we're going to see that a lot, I think.
All right, so moving forward here, how do you feel about both USA and Canada moving forward? Are you encouraged or discouraged, Jenna, here as far as the path for both of them? Do you feel as far as getting to that gold medal game? USA, that's a big hurdle to beat Canada. They will play Mexico in their next game. Canada, obviously, as will play Australia next. They have a game with Japan looming, which, in theory could be the deciding factor here. How do you feel about both teams here moving forward?
I think both, obviously, with the 2 wins, Team USA should feel good about it. Like, celebrate the victories, right? Of course, there are things that can be improved upon, especially offensively, but let's keep it positive and celebrate the victory and move forward. Take what went well forward and then make those adjustments moving forward. So I think with that being said, they're also familiar with Mexico too. So I think they're in a good position. With Team Canada, I think that they really competed really well today. Again, it's Monica Abbott, for crying out loud. So I think the fact that they were in this game and were able to quiet the U.S. offense the way that they did with their entire pitching staff, essentially, like they're in a good position as well. I don't think they should hang their heads. They do have a pretty tough rest of the way, though, for the Olympics. Like still having like Australia and Japan. I mean, really, it's like everybody, I guess, has a tough path, but the fact that they have Australia coming up, and then of course there's always Japan looming, that's going to be tough. But I think they're in a position and they seem to be in a mindset to do it. Their presence on the field feels like there's a level of confidence there that I think is going to serve them well moving forward.
I agree. And Victor brought this up in our previous podcast. Canada threw 2 games against Mexico and USA, 2 top teams, only 1 run allowed. Why is that significant? Because the first tiebreaker is head-to-head. But let's say there's a 3-way tie for first or second or third, whatever. The second tiebreaker they use is runs allowed. That's huge, Victor. Could pay dividends for Canada, even though they lost.
Yep.
Only 1 run allowed to USA, shutting out Mexico. If they take care of business here, they're still in good shape to maybe get a rematch with USA. And USA obviously has work to do to get to the gold medal. But I think both of these teams, to me, are right still in the mix. I'm not blinking at all. I think these are 2 still gold medal contenders, Victor.
Yeah, I think the race is still wide open. And, yes, Canada does have a little bit tougher road given that they lost to USA. USA 2-0. They can be a little easy knowing that they have the head-to-head in their back pocket. But the biggest thing, that's why I like this round robin, is that every game matters. Every run you give up matters. Every run you score matters. Because if you get into one of those tiebreaker situations where you're trying to see, are you going to play for the gold medal game? Are you going to play for the bronze? Are you going to be out of the medal running altogether? Those are the types of situations where if you hold an offense like USA to 1 run, if you hold a team like Australia scoreless, shut them out, that can benefit you on the back end with the tiebreakers.
I agree. Jenna, you've been incredible. Before we let you go, because you've been fantastic, did an hour with me in the pregame. You're here on with us in the postgame, so you're a machine. Tell the audience again about your show, your podcast, obviously, because you've got a pretty big guest that you kind of broke the news here. And Victor is probably going to be excited when you, because he doesn't know who you're having your next guest, but he's a huge fan of your next guest.
Yeah, so next guest, Natasha Watley will be joining the show. And she was actually my 4th guest ever on Believe in Softball. And then she came back and did a panel with Kelsey Stewart and Raven Siobhan and Tori Tyson as well last year. So she's my only repeat guest. And this is now like the 3rd time we've had her on the show. So I told her, it's like, you're not just a friend of the show, you're a best friend of the show at this point. But yes, she is coming on again to talk all things Olympics. You can find it on Believe in Softball. We're on Twitter and Instagram. It's spelled BLEAV with Believe Podcast Network. And we're also on YouTube as well. Get it anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can watch the videos as well.
Natasha Watley, Victor, that's your favorite player. We've had her on way back in the day. But that's a pretty good get. I'm always curious, Jenna, on your podcast, since you've started this, was there one guest that you've always wanted to talk to and you got to do it because of your podcast? And is there one guest that you still haven't gotten that's still on your bucket list?
That's interesting. Natasha might actually be the answer to the first part of your question. And it's a funny story, actually. Initially, she and I were supposed to co-host the show together. I haven't really ever shared that publicly before, but she and I were talking about it in our last conversation we just recorded. Initially, that was the case, but then, her schedule was crazy. She was coaching in Japan. There was too much stuff going on. But I remember that being sort of a moment where I was like, oh, wow. Like, I remember watching you play for Team USA, and, she was a Pac-12 player. I always wanted to play in the Pac-12. That was my dream, et cetera. And my first 3 guests had been like teammates and former coaches, and then the first one after that was Natasha. So I would say that. And then bucket list for who I haven't interviewed yet. Ironically, I have not interviewed Jessica Mendoza yet, although so that will happen. I have faith. She's actually from my hometown as well. We're from the same hometown in Camarillo, California. So maybe her, but also I would say, I don't know. I think Jenny Finch or Dot Richardson, like some of just like the classics. I remember Dot Richardson was number 1. I was number 1 when I played. I played shortstop growing up, all that good stuff. So I feel like she's kind of like one of the OGs that would be really special.
That's a good list. That's a good list. Mendoza would be. I'm surprised you haven't had. We've had Mendoza on. Yeah. Obviously, she's pretty busy, so I could see why maybe hasn't connected yet. But that's only a matter of time. A cardinal to cardinal there. But no, hey, look, folks, make sure you subscribe to her podcast, Natasha Watley. I'm worried now. Victor might bolt the show here and join you just to hang out with Watley if that would have happened. I'm just like, that could happen.
Bro, I got a lot of stuff on my mind, and I don't want to interrupt the greatness that's going to be coming up in this next episode with Jenna and Natasha Watley.
That's what I'm saying. That's going to be big show. Now, you had Amanda Scarborough prior to that. Great list. Mike Kendrea, she's had on as well. Right after he announced his retirement, nobody else has talked to Mike in depth about it since then. It's a great podcast. Recommend a follow there. Jenna, this has been awesome. It's always great to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of the games. We'll be in touch. We'll get you back on. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the Olympics there.
Yeah, thanks to you both. Always enjoy coming on and listening to you guys. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Jenna Becerra joining us here on In the Circle. That was good stuff from her. And let's see what's going on. We got more questions here. Danny Garcia, love both of your podcasts. Question, why do you think USA offense has not showed up? Again, that's been the theme here, Victor. It's been the theme. And again, we talked about earlier, and Jenna brought it up. Adjustments, right? I think she expects the approach at the plate. Some adjustments have to be made for this Team USA moving forward.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is, and it goes back to what you talked about earlier. You're facing some of the best pitchers in the world, so it's not going to be a walk in the park. Just you're going to go up there and face somebody who's going to deal 65 to 70 with weight and life and movement to pitch the ball up in the zone and expect to crush the ball and drop the eagle like some people think is going to happen on social media. Look, USA, as long as they get those timely hits and they continue to rely on their defense and their 1-2 punch of Kat Osterman and Monica Abbott, things will be just fine.
But I can understand the nerves, right? Because I could tell you that was a nerve-wracking game.
Yes.
It was a nerve-wracking game between USA and Canada there. So I understand the nerves, but I honestly do believe, Victor, and I could be proven wrong. That
what?
Oh, never mind. I just had a disconnect for a second there. See, so many people are upset about this run production there. It's going black here.
Click.
No. As long as it's not Malachi Black that's showing up. Anyway, wrestling pod. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of offense in this tournament.
No, it's not going to be all, Eric. People have to understand, and they have to realize that you're not going to get a 5-1 or 7-3 game in the Olympics with the elite type of pitching that all sides have. That's not going to happen. You have to understand that getting 2-3 runs and utilizing that defense and making it hold up is going to be the key to get you the gold medal. That's what USA did versus Italy. That's what it did tonight versus Canada. And that's the reason why USA is now 2-0.
Outside the Chute writes in, would you guys say this is the most even playing field for an Olympic Games ever? Yeah, I do, actually.
Easily.
I definitely. I think that's part of it, right? Like, we grew up 13 years ago and seeing USA run rule everybody. It just been run roughshod. I think those days are over. That's over. The world, this is a global game, whether Europe wants to admit it or not. That's the only reason why we're not in the Olympics every year is because of Europe. And I think it's a balanced field, especially in the circle. And Jenna brought that up earlier with the talent that we see pitching right now for all these teams. And I think that's why you're seeing the not a lot of offense. I know Japan had a big night in their offensive performance, but outside of that, it's been very dominated by pitching. And especially with Canada's pitching and USA's pitching, we'll see what Japan looks like. They're about to get ready to play Mexico at the top of the hour. So we're going to probably stay on until the start of that game and let us all watch that game. And then Vic will go to sleep. I will watch softball.
Actually get ready for tomorrow's podcast, sir.
Oh, that's a good segue. Good.
Thank you.
So coming up, make sure you tune in on Thursday's podcast. We will still have a regular podcast. We will be joined by George Washington head coach Christy Shoemaker, who's the head coach at GW. She will be on that show. We'll also recap the U.S.-Canada game as well on that episode. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We're still doing our regular podcast. And I mentioned this in the pregame show, and I'll mention it here, Victor. On Monday's show, we're going to be joined. It's fitting. We just talked to a Stanford Cardinal alum. We're going to be joined by another Stanford Cardinal alum. Lauren Lappin will be joining us on the show Monday, talking about her new move as the new assistant coach at Arizona, being under Caitlin Lowe. They've been friends for a long time. They were part of the 08 USA team. She'll talk about her move to Arizona, coaching with Caitlin Lowe, and how that move is like, and then some. And we'll talk a little Olympic softball with her on the Monday edition with Caitlin Lowe, an Olympian.
You mean Lauren Lappin, sir? You said Caitlin Lowe.
Well, they're both Olympians.
They are, but we're having Coach Lappin on the show.
We are having Lauren Lappin on the show talking about Caitlin Lowe and herself on that 08 team. In fact, they'll share the story, what their plans would have been for this Olympics if there was no COVID. We'll talk about that. And can I tell you who the new SID is who helped us set up the interview here, or would you rather wait?
Let's wait until Monday's show.
All right, fair enough.
Eric has, for full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, Eric has been getting on me about this new SID. Of course, Danny Martinez has moved on. We certainly appreciate Danny and wish him all the best in his next chapter of his journey. So Eric told me, like, dude, you won't believe the name of the SID I got in the interview. I'm like, save it for the podcast on Monday.
Well, let's just I'll give you a tease. Like, so for longtime listeners, there was an episode when we had Mark Montgomery, who was then the Louisiana Tech head coach, and now is the Maryland head coach. So I mentioned on the air, I didn't even tell Vic, but I go the SID's name was Malcolm Butler. So I say, hey, I want to thank Malcolm Butler, the SID for Louisiana Tech. I hear laughter coming, and I'm thinking, what's going on? And Victor is laughing. He's like, did you ask him where he was for the Super Bowl? Patriots. I'm like, no, you didn't.
Which we still don't know the answer to, by the way.
Neither does he. Obviously, not the same. Not that Malcolm Butler.
No.
Well, this one is kind of in that same level. However, it's funny, but yet Vic might kind of cringe at the same time. He might laugh and cringe at the same time. I don't know if it'll make air. That's all I'll say. But we'll see. It's funny nonetheless. If you're an old-time wrestling fan, you'll get it. That's all I'll say.
Oh boy. Oh, boy.
I can't even, because when I found that, I chuckled. Anyway, but Lauren, she's good. She's going to be great, first of all. So we're But and by the way, Malcolm Butler's got the last laugh on that. He's now the new voice of Louisiana Tech football.
Oh, by the way.
And playing defensive back.
Oh, by the way.
So it's a busy guy. Anyway, enough of the jokes.
Yes.
All right, so that's the story here in the Olympics. Victor, obviously, what do you want to see moving forward? I want to ask about USA here in Canada. I know you're concerned about the offense. You picked USA to win the gold over Japan. You did not have Canada to medal. Are you concerned about any of your picks, or are you still feeling good?
I'm a little concerned about my Canada not medaling pick right now. But, of course, it is still early. Things could change. But I feel real good, particularly with what Japan did versus Australia in that opening game. I feel very strong about that. I feel very good about that. And Mexico, I'm not looking too hot with that one so far.
Well, they're going to play Japan here in a few minutes, so they can kind of help some things here. Let me ask a question here. Let's see here. Other comments. Sebastian writing into our Twitter page in the Circles B. Seems like pitching is currently carrying this team, and the U.S. was a little lucky in the sixth that the Canadian base runner did not run straight at the plate, forcing an obstruction call. But a win is a win. Pitching was great. Canada is definitely a strong candidate for the medal. Yeah, I'm not. Look, Joey Lai is a great base runner. I don't know about the whole running. The whole point of and I see what he's saying. If you run into the catcher, you try to force a call there. We saw one early in the Australia-Japan game on Tuesday, but I don't. It is what it is. I thought it was clean on all sides. I don't have any memories there. But look, I mean, again, Victor, people are concerned about the offense. That has been the consistent theme here. I'm reading through all this. I'm trying to find a different question, and they're all offensive related.
All about the offense, man.
Man. Unbelievable.
What can I say?
I still think they're both gold medal contenders. Obviously, Japan is a big team there. They look probably still. I don't have any. I still think Japan is the favorites. We'll see how they go against Mexico. We'll see what Mexico does, Victor. We haven't had a chance to talk to you about the results, other results. While this is the segment as we call "While Victor was sleeping," because I stayed up till about 4 or 5 in the morning. But Mexico got shut out by Canada. Canada got to Escobedo in that game. I was surprised they didn't go with Danielle O'Toole against some of those lefties from Team Canada.
Yes.
You've seen both teams in person. Obviously, I know you didn't see the game live, but what was your reaction? You saw the score, Canada winning 4-0. Jen Salling with a homer, Rafter with a homer. Escobedo not sharp against them. I was surprised they didn't go with O'Toole. We'll see if they go with O'Toole here when they start against Japan. But this is a big game for Mexico. You've brought this up. They now got to play Japan tonight, and then they got Team USA around in the horizon here.
Yeah, and if you're Mexico, I feel with the loss to Canada, you almost have to. I feel you to get to a medal position, you have to split. If you still want to keep your gold medal hopes alive, you have to win both. Because if you split, you need a lot of chaos to happen, which is possible. But with the way Japan has been playing, the way the USA has been pitching, it's going to be very difficult if Mexico doesn't, at the bare minimum, split.
Right, because if they don't split, if they lose to Japan and USA, I don't know the path where they get into the gold medal game for sure. And it might be bronze medal game. Right. Plus, remember, they gave up 4 runs to Canada. You brought this up. How many? If they lose to Japan, how many runs do they give up? If they lose to USA, how many runs? Even if they split, all right, let's just say optimistically they split. How many runs do they give up in that split? That could still play a big role in this as we move forward in this tournament.
Absolutely.
And so this is a big game here coming up for Mexico. I know it's dangerous to say this word 2 games in.
Don't say it.
But
don't say it then.
Kind of a must win, no?
It's not a must win. It's in your best interest to win.
Right, because if you lose this game, I mean, Team USA game is almost a must win at that point, right? You can't go 0-3. You cannot have 3. It's very difficult. I know the schedule is kind of front loaded. Somebody was going to get this type of draw. So we'll see what they do. They have the pieces to make it happen. And then obviously we'll look to see what Japan does. Japan only had 3 pitchers on their staff. They used a couple of them in their run rule of Australia from that standpoint. So they were impressive. So I'm curious to see if that offense from Japan carries over. They're the host team, obviously. And then the late night game tonight, Australia and Italy. Italy showed themselves very well in a 2-0 loss to Team USA. We'll see if they keep that going. And then Australia, Victor, they went with Parnaby, not Gabby Plain. And I would think they go with Gabby Plain today, but you also wonder how much Gabby Plain has, considering she had it. And I talked with Jenna in the pregame show about this. She carried the load for Washington this year. You wonder how many pitches does she have in this tournament?
Yes. And the energy that you have to exert to do what Gabby Plain did, nearly leading Washington to the Women's College World Series. They advanced to the Super. So I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen with Australia, but it will be very fascinating to watch how that all unfolds early morning this on Thursday.
That's correct on that. All right, let's kind of wrap it up here a little bit because, I'm lacking sleep. That's number 1. Number 2, we got to get ready for a podcast that will be coming up in the morning. Victor, let's kind of give me your final thoughts here as we wrap up this. This was a great night. I'll be curious to see what the numbers are for this game, considering the only main competition they had was AEW wrestling, which draws about anywhere between 700,000 to 1 million viewers. So that's usually a top 5 cable program from 18 to 49 age. I'll be curious to see how this USA-Canada game draws, if it can draw right around that number with AEW from that standpoint. I think that's something I'll be looking forward to in the coming days and weeks about the TV numbers. I don't have a TV number for the US-Italy game at the time as we're doing this show, so hopefully I'll get that by the weekend. But, man, that was a fun game, and I hope we get more great games moving forward. That's kind of my final thoughts. What's your final thoughts? I'm
excited to see softball back in the Olympics. So far, so good with the games. There's no drop off in energy on any of the sides, in spite of the fact that there are no fans. And you're seeing that even though we talk about home runs and launch angle and all this stuff, pitching is still what will bring you to the dance. And I'm certainly happy to see that on the grandest stage.
Also, by the way, more positive news out of the Olympics. I mentioned this in the pregame show. Officially, the 2032 Olympics will be held in Brisbane.
Yes.
That's huge for softball. I think there's a very good possibility softball will be in the Olympics in 2028 in Los Angeles and then in Brisbane in 2032, Victor. So I think that's a big positive for softball there where they can get consistently in the Olympics. Hopefully we have a tournament that creates a lot of buzz here moving forward and really creates that thirst, if you will, for the Olympics in 2028, 2032. I mean, it should be in the sport. I mean, some of the nonsense sports they have in the Olympics, if you call it sports, is kind of ridiculous to begin with. But that's kind of my hope there, is that this tournament, regardless of who wins, creates enough buzz and interest to say, hey, we want this back in LA. Yeah. Let's push this to LA. Let's take it to the next level. And as well as Brisbane, which is obviously a softball country as well, in the great city of Brisbane, Australia. I think that's really good news for softball.
Huge news. And it kind of just tells you, Eric, that the sport has a chance to really grow and get out on the global landscape, with it being likely in LA in 2028, likely being in Brisbane in 2032. This is the opportunity for this generation of softball players to really make their mark after this year's games, even though they're not going to happen in 2024 in France. They're going to have opportunities 2028, 2032, and the sport of softball, you can sense that the tide is coming, that softball is ready to burst onto the global landscape as one of the more popular sports in the world, and this is a golden opportunity for softball to do that. And, well, Mr. Lopez has dropped off the line, so that's the universal sign that it's time for us to get on out of here for our live show. Thanks again to Jenna Becerra for joining us. Oh, hey.
I told you.
Mr. Lopez.
I know, my glitches, I told you, it was playing mess with me there. Let's wrap it up on that note since my computer's deciding to wrap it up. Thanks to Jenna Becerra, as you were mentioning on the show. We will let you know. We're going to be back on this weekend. We will not be on Thursday or Friday night. We'll be back on.
And, of course, Eric gets disconnected again. What he meant to say was we'll be likely back on this weekend. When that will be, we don't know. Follow us on Twitter at InTheCircleSB for more updates about that, and we'll get you information about when we'll be back on live with our recap of the Olympics. So let's enjoy the next game taking place. I'm Victor Anderson, signing off. This has been In the Circle Live, post-game edition for the Tokyo Olympics.